hello, Lost Legion. The light just went out, so excuse the lighting. I want to ask Hartford if we can get enough people, or just anyone. We need more than one because we need it to show that we're going to have a steady, a steady progression as my trainer. Will you guys be my virtual trainer as a fighter, and I'll be yours, and as a method, and we're going to invest part of it to own by we want to own the unchanging variable of a relationship to nature that was tactically denatured, forced on the colonization. We have to understand the slavery of our founders, because George Washington wants us to understand it. It's implied, and James Madison, our founding father, wants us to. James Madison, our biggest founding father. That was our first justice, sitting at the Constitutional Convention where they were all extorted intellectual slaves, extorted fact treatment natures, forced to theater, not only forced to theater into lies, as criminal insidiousness nature rolls with tactics that were entrenched here, forced criminal database relationships. They were all slavery. In other words, George Washington, James Madison, they want. In other words, this is not to make a fight, a war, but this is to show how our fact treatment nature was employed to roles as fact treatment natures, playing a jobs game, playing pseudo legal nature, morality and ethics, integrity, and covering that up progressively as abridged fact treatment natures and roles with the Constitution. The motivations are in relationship to how internation sciences were forced, entrenched here before the births of our enslaved, intellectually and fact treatment nature enslaved founding parents. Everyone. That's what money wasn't. And this was black agencies, black, using what is forced, entertained by all victim predators, because we can't even. There's a reason we have colors. See, the blue sky, the clear is a demonstration of it in the progression of its own value, with immediate space, nature, distinctly from overall space. And now the extent of this is not being demonstrated by theories being forced on in relationship to as a bridge fact treatment nature roles all nations to all areas, trained to blame this on other nations, extorted to all areas by and as their own fact treatment nature, stuck, forced to internation sciences to all areas with all roles of. This came before the founding fathers of every nation. Like Mao Zedong, for example, he had to fight. He had to retreat, fighting wars. You know, everyone was victim predator. Everyone had the same enemy, but no one understood it, because all modern nations were wrought to roles with it through a minority. In other words, through the sciences, left criminally re-engineered to make fake sophistication and all comparison natures, all consciously, because comparison is negative value nature and correlation is positive value nature. And so we're going to examine proofs between fact mistreatment in relationship to this, and this is relationship to demonstrate this. We have to use fact treatments not being let, and we're not having them let, and they're stacking databases and doing offensive things using courts, even prisons, and even schools of all ages of fact treatment nature as trained, as hurt reaction nature, vested odds. So in other words, justifications of it. So our founding branches were only realized, forced to roles with what was consciously forcing England be the face of it here. But it was them together. And it was only them together as Oz sophistications in relationship to everyone else. Now, I'm not talking about our founders, because their cause as us was to counter this, but not being with free speech, and with that force glorified in relationship to the long-term tactics they had in relationship to the forced enslaved relationship to nature that they forced with our infrastructural standards before, with the extortion and slavery of our founders, fact treatment natures. We're going to deal with it that way. See, they won't need us. Don't forget, too. African agencies. I mean, they're all nations, Asian nations. They were here, too. Because a minority was only, in other words, but we don't go after them. We just go after what's not letting the abridged fact treatment nature. And this is another proofs that just like we need Latin laws, like habeas corpus, habeas certiorari, and things like that, inside of jail, and outside of them they still use it, but we also need inside of jail and outside of jail, in relationship to the correlation nature, in relationship to the way it already showed ancient nation, internation sciences how to work. But they didn't understand what got really smart like that and envisioned a way, a method that worked against our fact treatment nature. So this only victim predator of agencies as all nations, modern nations, with the extortion of our founders before, now as a fact treatment natures, abridged, forced to negotiations that were and as the same negative value nature progression. Our species a cancer to Earth, not only to Earth, but to overall space nature. And before that, and as that, all the way down to here, its identity, that positive onto itself, we're against that, Leth of Hades. So the identity of overall space nature, which had here, has the value of Earth with no criminal persuasions, by its only overall natural system. See, this is criminally re-engineered, so nature will only demonstrate, because it only works through this with revealed original revelations. And that revealed a proper fact treatment nature, in which this is not. And because not only is it not, it's formally, as states, and bottom up, as exploited areas, all left with it blamed on all roles by that as breaching nature, breaching roles. And top down in relationship to the forced negotiations and trade agreements and stuff like this with all nations, only that realize blaming on other. So in other words, like we have Latin statutes, and as English is a body of value as a nature, and a demonstration of how all nature stared the same nature in progression of itself as a value nature relationship to itself. Us, the shared identity, as positive value nature, which is progressively here, demonstrated, yes, we're correct, through correlation, through ratiocination, which is identity that reveals we're correct by demonstrating positive value nature progressions called evolution. And when we're wrong, it pushes our identity, becomes identity with and as the worth, the value of consciousness that is pushed from here, because it can no longer overall space in relationship to the immediate value of space, nature, Earth. It can no longer being able to progress its value through a species of all ulterior value nature systems to all areas, alternative fact treatment natures to what ancient campus and internation sciences revealed before this, before the extortion of every modern nation's compromised foundings, forced, and markets positions and identities forced abroad by nature, but also now by and as identities all, as fact treatment natures needed to blame it on other things, needing to defend identities in relationship to progressions with and as the cause of internation terror and worse to all areas, and no potentials and forsaken ones like native rights and means being blamed on others. The cause of that is not an accident. It was technically affected. So, and we're not being able to have quality fact treatments. We're our quality of diffusion as positive or negative, as the identity of positives relationship to itself in relationship to immediate space nature. You see, this is where space, in other words, all parts of our space, our body have a sequence, share the same sequence. The identity of each cell is also with and as the value of the identities of the other cells. And it's with and as the value of every other body. And because, and distinctly with the rest of nature, because it's in relationship to, it's involved with the roles. In other words, all of a sudden, evolution comes from clear means demonstrating itself. When we stay, it's positive value nature here. All of a sudden, all the space's identity, it realizes is the progressive value of itself through us. This doesn't come flying into space. It comes keeping the value here. It comes understanding our means for denature. They tactically denatured Native American landscapes and education. And then they did it again worse. And they invested everyone to roles doing it worse and needs to do it worse. For example, in Connecticut, Rhode Island, that's considered Connecticut. The colonies, all one big slave, fake sides. Mashantucket, Mohegan, and they're all divided from a nature when they owned internation sciences. In other words, this is what we're gonna have theory and where we have to have theory, and where theories are tied to delusions and to criminal persuasions with the sciences, not demonstrated per trick fact treatment nature justifications of them originally and stayed. We have to address this, and thank God that they recorded themselves. Our longtime homeland, internation families, and the new ones record themselves apart with and as, with everyone staying victim predator to, with our time, as fact treatment nature. As fact treatment natures now, when by identity, not by this. Not by it, and then everyone's not by it because everyone's employed to identities that are ulterior and invested to a value nature system originally denatured relationship to be, to stay, remain tactically blamed on other. Everyone chop shop hurt conviction nature, abridged fact treatment natures, talking about what it is about. In other words, wealth. You know how many different natures of wealth there are? That's part of the problem in Russia. And the part, for example, and they're making it, that is the same minority enemy that we have here with the same original fake side fact treatment natures, justifications of it, like with Boston and with humor and stuff like that. must understand, originally stayed uncharged, but recorded criminally covered up databases and evidence rackets and roles within as that nature. Know how what's his name? President Kennedy. He said himself, there's a conspiracy against us. You know, the Russian Vladimir Putin came over one time, a Super Bowl guy who had a Super Bowl ring, take the ring off and put it in his pocket, walk away, because there's nothing he could do to him. You know what I'm saying? And that was because in relationship to how these guys know. In other words, that was actually moral, because this is giving us means to know about the extortion of our leaders distinctly from ours, but together by the same method. In other words, they're all bridge fact treatment natures, told and held in relationship to bottoms on markets that are as with and as negative one negative value nature progression has a whole bunch of identities of roles with and as it, because it was set to stay up. It was engineered. Every nation, modern nation, was engineered to be cultivated, blaming it on other, because then the live progressions of that are engineered. So there were slavery laws before our founders' births. They were already taking the Native Americans to identities, fighting with themselves, because their means were tactically denatured. They denature all their means to get food and stuff like that. Then they invested, like, so for example, Yukon. They use it with farming. We're reliant. We need to eat now, especially the way we're invested too. We're reliant upon, mass farming. But that also had roles with another nature of organized crime that was with the slavery of our founders, and with the slavery of Native Americans' rights forsaken still, in relationship to these natures of criminal, insidious, formal, force glorified as our founders by their enemies who forced glorified writing their history still ours. So this is with our fact treatment nature. Now by accident making people blame abridged fact treatments top down on other things and glorifying that and playing the game as is broke. When all we have to do is admit this together, and now we're only going to take counter positions so I want to know, are you guys going to fight or what? We're not going to fight to hurt anyone. We're going to, in other words, we're going to show sequence nature. We're going to show recorded proofs that there's database and evidence stacking in relationship to a method by all fact treatment natures to all areas. And, invested to defenses of this and those natures and defenses of themselves in relationship to bad things to justify on others. And so, are we going to do it? Are we going to make the virtual? YouTube's only one of many ways, but I wanted that. Well, once we stack, in other words, I'll write books for us. It you'll be a virtual trainer, and we'll go into the boxing arts.